Hi guys. We're starting the second half of chapter 27, and we're getting into American society after the war. So, as we start into this, if you want a heading for today, it would be American society and politics after the war. So, several things. One is the problems of reconversion, as in converting back from a wartime economy to a peacetime economy. So how is America going to handle this? And there are several theories as to how it should be handled, but there's really only one decision. Like, you can only do it one way. So right after the war was over, people were afraid a depression was going to happen. Big spending cuts happened with the government, who was spending over $100 billion a year in their budget during the height of the war. And right after the war, they canceled about $35 billion worth of defense contracts. That's a lot of money. So if you're this company and you're counting on $35 billion in inventory coming through, you're getting this kind of revenue, and then you're giving out a product to the government, and it's suddenly gone. That's a big hit to your business. You have to completely stop production. Chances are you're going to be laying off mass numbers of people. So people were afraid, what's going to happen now that the government has just canceled all of these orders? Well, several things helped offset this. One of those things was there was massive increases. There were massive increases in consumer demand for goods. So the Americans who were coming home from the war, or the people who were now able to get goods that were already in America and hadn't went overseas, but during the war there were rations and they were now able to get these goods. They were buying them in mass quantities. So increased consumer demand for goods counterbalanced or offset the large cuts in government spending. Another thing that helped was the federal government cut taxes by $6 billion. So there was more money left to the consumer to buy goods with that extra money. So if the government's not taking it from you, you still keep it. And generally, if you have money, you're going to spend it or invest it in something. So an extra $6 billion in the economy meant that people had more money to spend. Also, the GI Bill, which allowed for job training and education for the American soldiers that were returning home, the government paid for that. So there was still government money being put into the economy, but it was usually put in the economy in the form of payments to educational institutions. Also, prices are rising and inflation is rising. Now, this seems to be a worry for a lot of people, that inflation is increasing. I mean, nobody likes inflation. That means your dollar's worth less, right? But with the inflation comes rising prices. And a lot of companies are trying to stay ahead of the inflationary curve with their price increases, just to get a little bit extra money out of the consumer. But really, inflation rises before anyone tries to do anything about it. Inflation rises of almost 25% in 1 year. It was usually increasing around 14 to 15%. And Truman wasn't. He tried to eliminate price controls just to please the American people, and then inflation peaks up at 25% per year at one point, and then he tries to institute some price controls. But you're going to see the struggle of government intervention versus government non-intervention. So what really works? Well, we're going to see what works. Before we look at what actually worked to help fix the economy, we need to look at labor, as in organized labor, as in unions, and how they responded to a lot of the restrictions that were lifted from them after the war ended. So initially, we had talked about there were laws that banned people in the unions from striking as a union strike. There were still wildcat strikes. But now, a lot of strikes started happening as soon as peace was declared. And the response from the government was often, end this strike, or we're going to nationalize, or we're going to seize control of your company, and we're going to run it. So the threat was to the union workers, we'll seize control, and we'll put people in there that will work, so you'll be out of a job. And the threat was also, more so leveled at the owners of the companies, which was, do you like making money? Do you like reaping the profits of your business? Well, you'd better do something and settle this dispute, because otherwise we're going to nationalize your company and we're going to run it the way we want, not the way you want. And this happened with the railroads, which we're going to get into in a little more detail. It happened with the coal mines. And Truman, who's president right now, his argument is these are things that are essential to the economy of the nation. And if we don't nationalize these, then if the strike keeps going on, it's going to harm the whole infrastructure of the country. So you're going to see there are actually a couple of times a little later in the chapter we'll cover where the government seizes a couple of companies to try to precipitate the end of a strike. Let's talk about the fair deal now. So your next subject in your notes would be the fair deal rejected. So I'm giving a bit of a spoiler. It's going to be rejected, but there's going to be a sequel. So anyway, Truman is trying to be, it seems like he's trying to be the new FDR. I mean, FDR did the New Deal, and now Truman is proposing the fair deal. Once peace has been established, he has no qualms about trying to establish progressive policies. So I'm going to try to rattle off a list of things that he wanted to enact that were involved in the fair deal. One of those things was increasing the minimum wage from 40 cents an hour to 65 cents an hour, expanding Social Security benefits, a vast array of public works, public housing, public revitalization projects as far as like national forests, state forests, revitalizing the St. Lawrence Seaway, and one of his big pet deals he wanted was health insurance. He wanted national health insurance. So Obamacare, which was the first actual successful nationalized healthcare program, and we can argue on semantics. I would say it's nationalized healthcare. However, if you want to argue with me when I get back about it or have a debate, that's great. We can go fact for fact and we'll take a look at it. But anyway, Truman definitely wanted a nationalized healthcare system. He made no bones about it. So this has been tried. Actually, it was tried back in the 1930s and failed. And then Truman tries it and it fails. And Clinton wanted nationalized healthcare and it failed. And then Obama wanted it and it passed. And then the Supreme Court upheld it. So there had been many attempts before Obama tried it, but he was the first successful one. But anyway, a lot of Republicans did not like the fair deal. And they actually, they campaigned when in the off term, like the midterm elections, so it's not the presidential election, it's just the elections for senators and representatives for Congress. They campaigned on the slogan, had enough. So the slogan was, have you essentially had enough of this? And they won dramatic increases in the Senate and in the House, to the point where several times the Senate and the House were both able to override Truman's veto on things. And you need a supermajority to do that. So anyway, Senator Robert Taft, this is like, he's a quintessential Republican conservative senator of the time. And this is a quote from him where he's addressing the issue of legislating and trying to legislate prosperity. And he says, "We've got to break with the corrupting idea that we can legislate prosperity, legislate equality, legislate opportunity." So this is the Republican platform here in the congressional races. We cannot legislate equality or prosperity, or opportunity for that matter. So he's saying laws aren't going to do anything. And a lot of progressives disagree with that idea. However, the Republicans held the majority in the House and the Senate after this election. One of the most impressive things that the Republicans did was they passed the Taft-Hartley Act. You should put this in your notes, Taft-Hartley Act. And you know all the controversy right now about the right-to-work states where they're basically saying you do not have to be a part of a union. That's the Taft-Hartley Act back here. The Taft-Hartley Act was the same exact thing. It wasn't forcing right to work, but it was allowing right to work. So it was saying you do not, and actually you cannot, as a company and as a union, like your personal union, your local union and the big union that you're a part of, you cannot force people to be in your union to work for this company. And this is the Taft-Hartley Act. And it was vetoed by Truman, but again, supermajority overrid the veto. So this is going to be, you're going to see a trend. Truman's going to veto, the Republican-dominated Congress is going to override. Let's talk about the election of 1948 now. So this is where Truman is running for re-election as president. And the public generally views Truman as inept. They think he's weak, they think he just doesn't have control of the party, which he doesn't. You're going to see the party's going to fragment. It's going to split into 3 different sects, and each of these is going to take a different trail politically. So you're going to see some Southern Democrat or Dixiecrat party coming out of this. You're going to see a more left-leaning party as well coming out of this. But Truman just can't seem to get enough support to win the presidency. So Thomas Dewey is going to run against Truman in the elections. But before we even get there, the Democrat Party does not like Truman, and he tries to pass a civil rights bill. And your book says that Southern conservatives rejected this. It's Southern conservative Democrats. So the Democrats in Truman's own party filibustered the Civil Rights Act that he tried to pass. So I just want to make that distinction clear. Your book tries to pass it off a little bit differently, whether intentionally or unintentionally. However, it was Southern Democrats that filibustered this, and that actually alienated the Southern Democrats from Truman, and they're going to form the Dixiecrat Party, or the States' Rights Party. Anyway, so the polls, because they did polling back here before elections as well, they show that Dewey is going to win by a landslide. So Truman pretty much has no hope to win this election. But he tries a tactic that's all too common in politics, which is essentially mudslinging. He manufactures crises and then capitalizes on them. So he puts forth a bunch of legislation that is progressive legislation. The Republicans keep shooting it down. And he says, look, the Republicans are doing nothing. They're the good-for-nothing, do-nothing party. And he keeps doing this. And while he's doing this, by the way, he's traveling tens of thousands of miles. He travels almost 33,000 miles during his campaign. And he makes over 350 political speeches while he's campaigning. But anyway, he manufactures drama. And it starts getting the Democrats to stand behind Truman because they're saying, oh, look at those bad Republicans. They just don't want to do anything. Look at inflation. Truman says, hey, I've tried. Look, the Republicans, they're doing nothing about it. I've proposed this legislation, the Republicans have shot it down. So he's creating drama that really doesn't exist. He doesn't even expect these bills to pass. He's putting bill after bill after bill after bill out there. He's getting his Democrats in Congress to do this. And it keeps getting shot down. Well, if you look on page 767 in your book, you can see who wins the election, because Truman is holding a newspaper that they were so confident Dewey was going to win, they pre-printed newspapers. The Chicago Daily Tribune printed Dewey defeats Truman and had it out. It was out. People could buy it. And Truman is holding up the paper saying, sorry about your luck, Dewey. Looks like I won. But anyway, Truman somehow, he wins re-election, but he wins re-election by manufacturing drama. Okay, the last thing in this video before we move on to another topic is the sequel of the fair deal. So once Truman wins re-election, he tries again for the fair deal. He wants, and he gets some of what he wants, by the way, but he wants the minimum wage to be 75 cents an hour now. He tried initially for 65 cents. He gets 75 cents an hour. He gets low-income housing. He almost gets 1 million housing units built. He gets long-term rent subsidies for these people as well. But he lost on his most important issues, which were he lost on health care, and he also lost on the civil rights bill that he proposed. So the fair deal part 2, he tried again, and he got some of it, but he lost a lot of what he wanted as well.